Giving it. Having it to give. Taking it. Moving it around.
Hello.
Giving it, having it, taking it.
I'm Martha Senator.
Shaking it, creating it, loving it,
And this
living it,
is Listen and Be Heard.
loving it. Living it is sewing a coat.
I have Tony Robles on the line. Are you there, Tony?
Yeah, Martha, good afternoon. Good afternoon, WPBM listeners.
Good afternoon to you. I was just listening to American Roots before this show came on, and they were having the cool show.
Never be able to do that.
Oh, yeah. That's great. That's great.
Because it's hot outside, right?
Thinking the unthinkable.
It sure is. You know, I was in my car roasting. My air conditioning went out on me, so I have to go and get some Freon. And the thing that doesn't help is that my driver's side window doesn't go down. So, I gotta get that fixed. But it's been hot. Have you been dealing with it, Martha?
Well, I get up early to do my gardening and try to get inside before the heat really hits. And then I'm just really grateful for the air conditioning. But it is like the hottest week on record on Earth. So I think it's something that we all need to be paying attention to and not just trying to ignore. As hard as it is to ignore the heat, you know?
Yeah, but also too, I have friends up in Vermont, and they've been having some serious flooding up there in the Montpelier area, and that's where I went to school. I was in the writing program at Vermont College.
Right.
So they're dealing with they're dealing with it up there in a different way, and it's. To see those pictures is just really shocking because I was just there about a year and a half or so ago,
Yeah, well, I mean, we're getting hit in different places with weather that, like, people have never had before, that they don't expect. If you're feeling helpless about all that, come back next week because we're doing a 2-hour special here in the studio with Laura Langnick, who is a local author who wrote Resilient Agriculture. And we had started talking about the 12 things that people can do themselves to address climate change. And when we did a 20-minute segment with her, I just felt like it wasn't enough to really get all the ideas across. So we're doing a whole 2-hour special next week that I hope people will tune into.
That's fantastic. Yeah, that's going to be really good. That's going to be some real medicine and some real practical things that people can do. Because oftentimes we just look at these things as being these concepts, but they're real concrete things that we can do.
Well, it always feels better to do something, right, than just feel like there's nothing that we can do, that it's somehow out of our hands,
Yes.
But this week is more of the Tony Robles show. You've got 3 interviews coming up, one with Nancy Sloan, one with the founder of Poor, I'm not sure, is she the founder of Poor magazine?
She's the founder of Poor, that's correct.
Right.
She's
Tiny.
the founder of Poor magazine, Poor News Network, Prensa Pobre. Started out in the Bay Area. They're in deep East Oakland, and they're doing a lot of good stuff with the Homefulness project, and really making a difference in terms of it's a houseless people, landless people project revolution that really has some very concrete solutions. They've started a homefulness project that houses formerly homeless families and individuals,
So we'll hear more about that.
So she'll get more into that.
Right. But you also spoke again to Nancy Sloan. You did an interview with her in a rather noisy spot, and our general manager, Davine Dial, thought that the message that Nancy has is so important that she asked us to actually do another interview with better sound circumstances. And then you also spoke to a local celebrity in Hendersonville.
Jose Case, that's correct. I've only lived in Hendersonville, close to 4 years now, and there are characters in every town that, you see them, people call them eccentric. People say that, they're just unforgettable characters. He is like that. He's I guess would be the equivalent of that in Hendersonville. He's a street musician. Everybody knows Jose. I guess the equivalent, if you were back in San Francisco, it would be Emperor. He would be the Emperor Norton of Hendersonville. Emperor Norton was an eccentric who was kind of like the unnamed emperor of San Francisco, even though we didn't have an emperor. But back in those days, that was his name. It was just kind of bestowed upon him because people looked at him as this kind of bigger-than-life eccentric figure. And Jose is a very interesting guy, beautiful guy,
Yes, so we're going to bring all of that to our audience today, and I guess we better get right to it because we'll also be hearing from Laurie Stone. So I want to thank you for joining me, Tony, this afternoon from your usual spot. Are you in your usual spot?
I'm right next to the dumpster at my job, which is actually okay because it is providing ample shade. So. Oh,
okay. So they're used to, you can find many uses for dumpsters, I'm told.
There we go. All right.
All right. Well, thanks so much for joining us, Tony.
Thanks, Martha. I'll talk to you later.
Bye-bye. So, as I mentioned, I spoke to Laurie Stone last night for a few minutes, our commentator on pop culture and feminism. And she was talking about a book written by a woman who had a relationship with Jack Kerouac. And I'm just going to take you straight to that conversation.
Hi, Martha. How are you?
I'm good. How are you this evening?
Good. Yeah, it's a little hot here. So, what's going on?
Well, I've been reading your Substack. You're writing about Johnson's minor characters.
Mm-hmm.
It's pretty interesting stuff. And I'm going to jump right to a quote. Men had sex while women were sex. So, for women, there could be no such thing as pleasure alone, since sex was their function. Risk and destruction were glamorous, but while men conquered danger and survived, women often became famous for ending up dead.
Mm.
And you go on to talk about some of those women who ended up dead in that scene.
Well, it's not my what you were reading isn't my understanding. It's my understanding of Joyce's understanding. Right. So that's why it's complicated. And so what that piece is doing, it's looking at a piece that was written in 1983 about a woman who wrote a book in 1983. At the time, she was 47, and she was looking back to her youth when she started out, and she had an affair with Jack Kerouac. And so, in a way, the book is called Minor Characters because she's a minor character. In his life, he's a minor character. In her life, except not really. There's a lot of Joyce and Jack Kerouac that happens even after this book. In any case, what's interesting about the book for me then in 83 and now in 23 is, or 80, is it 83 or 84? Anyway, 40 years ago, was that this narrator, this Joyce, who's looking at Joyce Glassman, the girl, is still divided. She's really interested in having come from that beat world and what the values and mores were of that world, and the sexual double standard.
Yes.
Correct. Well, so did it everywhere else, but maybe it wasn't as vaunted or made a sort of
or maybe
style
someone
as it was
entered into that not recognizing. Maybe
they all did and they all didn't.
Like,
I mean, I would
they were
say
looking for that same freedom. I think that many of the men were looking for, but they didn't maybe find it.
Absolutely. Perfect example. Yes, I would say that's exactly that's Joyce's story that she's telling in this book. And I think what you just said totally nails it, that it looks like an invitation to freedom. And in some ways, for Joyce Glassman at Barnard College, looking like she's going to go and be forced to sort of duplicate her mother's life, sex with Jack Kerouac and sex anyway itself looks like a ticket to the party. But it's not a great party in Joyce's case or any of the cases of the women of that time, because they're invited to be spectators at the boys' party, basically. And that's what the book is about. So Joyce is analyzing in that paragraph that you read from the double standard, men can't and women can't. Men can and women can't, or men wind up looking like the heroes and women wind up dead, or etc. And in a lot of ways, the book is really
still just the muse.
The woman is the muse. Absolutely. But she wasn't that to Jack. That's not. She was, the secretary. It was a much more kind of basement role, I would say. But anyway, she didn't really have that much of a role. It was, he'd roll in and they didn't have that many encounters. But it meant a lot. I think what she does is she projects an entire world and worldview from that experience. But she's still very romantically attached to it. He didn't really, in her head, he did. They didn't have a very long relationship and it wasn't that big a deal to him. And he's very hostile and mean to her a lot of the time. She published their letters and they're so painful to read because, he's horrible. And she can't quite. Anyway, that's it. I talk about that in the piece, the letters and her relationship to them. But I want to ask you, what do you make of that passage and why did you pick it to read?
Well, I did find it interesting, I guess, because you go on to describe what your experience was in college a little later than hers,
a lot later,
right?
And, in only 10 years, but it was like a different planet
world. But I was thinking about how still, even though it was a different world and there were seemingly, at least in appearances, many differences, I've experienced that same type of, you're here, but we don't want to hear you talk that much. And even like the milieu of the Lower East Side that I was in the 1990s, to me, still seemed very dominated by, or just even New York in general, was very dominated by a very male type of energy. You could think about, the whole thing with the movie producer whose name is escaping Harvey Weinstein. It was kind of that atmosphere that I felt New York was like, that women were certainly always, and I was certainly always brushing off unwanted advances, just even walking in the street or, when you're seeking to be heard, to be taken seriously.
You're saying sexism still exists? Yes,
absolutely.
And misogyny.
But absolutely. It also still exists within that world that wants to appear to be seeking freedom and for everyone, or has egalitarian ideas, and yet somehow still manages to not be very egalitarian.
Yeah, but that's why we started the women's movement, and I think I would recommend that you stay away from men and hang out with women, because then you still get a lot of crap and things that you don't necessarily want. There's still power, there's still craziness, there's still But what's interesting to me about the second section, or the section in the piece where I talk about going to Barnard, and instead of this sneering, horrible male professor that she has, who says to the girls in the class who are so little puppies, so eager to be writers, well, if you were going to be a writer, you wouldn't be enrolled in this school, and you wouldn't be enrolled in this class. You wouldn't even be in school. You'd be hopping freighters and having experience. And meanwhile, you're thinking, well, what are you doing in this class? Mr. Mustache, is thinking he should be at Harvard instead of teaching the girls. But when I went to Barnard, I had Kate Millett come into my class.
It precludes this whole feminine experience, as if that's not even a valid thing to talk about. You have to be a hobo. You can't be a mother.
Well,
you have to be
a lot of women are not mothers. They're whatever they are.
Right.
Yeah.
But whatever they are, is somehow
you mean
not...
the model was very macho.
Right. Or
the only model was macho.
Or why not be a feminist mother? Why should that experience not be legitimate as well?
It is to women.
As to speak about
women seeking approval from men is not such a great idea.
No,
I recommend not doing it.
Because then
it never is.
That's exactly right. But so
stay away from them.
Women avoid that? They have to publish each other.
And
support each other in that way.
Yes. So publishing and support, good, very good. I was very lucky because I was at the Village Voice, for 25 years, and that's really a foundational experience for me as a writer. But I had male editors, I guess as many male, I don't know if I don't know the numbers, but I had so many male editors at the Voice because I wrote in so many different parts of the paper, and so many female editors. And it was such a countercultural world where we were covering the counterculture, but we were also trying to live it, in the workplace. That doesn't mean it's not still a lunatic family. Workplaces are families. They're going to be some kind of, all of that energy is going to work its way in. But I've really had a huge amount of encouragement from men, and I sometimes wonder why. And I think partly it's because I write about sex and I make them comfortable about that, but I could be wrong. And the other thing is, if I know them and I like them and they like me, then it's just human to human at that point. And if they're really, really not interested in my ideas, they never come. It's like the world is a bar, and you're sitting at the bar and someone hits on you because they like the way you look. But as soon as you open your mouth, they hear what you really are and they don't want to go any further. One of the things that's really important is what kinds of stories are women going to tell, and what kinds of stories that don't get heard by anyone if women don't tell them, about the lives of other women, about their own experience, right, to tell the truth of all of that. Now, who's going to support that kind of publishing and publication, or the kind of conversation we're even having? Probably not that many men. And so, yes, it's very important to have alternative ways to enter the world. That the way that women help each other in the world now, or feminists help other women, is a continuation of the women's movement. It isn't necessarily, that we're organized, but we're carrying out the work of that kind of consciousness in our day-to-day lives. That's, to me, the success of the women's movement.
Well, I think we'll leave it right there for this week. Thank you so much, Laurie.
You're very welcome. Good to talk to you, Martha. Take care.
Good to talk to you. Bye-bye. So that was Laurie Stone. And as she mentioned, she wrote for the Village Voice for many years. And we thank her for her astute observations of culture. If you would like to read from the Substack that we keep referring to, which is how she's publishing a lot of her writing these days, you can go to lauriestone.substack.com. And we're going to move right along now to Tony Robles' interview with Nancy Sloan.
Hey, thank you, Martha. And again, this is Listen and Be Heard Radio on WPVM 103.7. Check out our website, listenandbeheard.net. We interview many authors. We have many local authors as well as authors from across the country. No less true today. We have a local author on our website, listenandbeheard.net. We're trying to get 1,000 subscribers. So if you go on our website, please be sure to hit the subscribe button. We have a little less than 600 subscribers right now. Help us out. We can send you lots of alerts, and you can check out our content as well. Nancy Sloan, we have the pleasure of having here today as a guest. She is the author of The Gravel Driveway, Breaking the Cycle of Abuse, published by Mountain Page Press in Hendersonville. So that's not that far from Asheville. She's a retired director of nursing, of course, the author of The Gravel Driveway. She is living happy and contented, as we all should, in North Carolina with her husband, Tom, and pursues her creative outlets such as singing that brings her joy. Welcome to Listen and Be Heard Radio. How you doing today, Nancy?
I'm doing well, Tony. Thanks for having me.
Hey, I've been reading the book. It's a wonderful read. And let me just start off by asking you, in your bio that I just read, it says that you enjoy singing.
Yes.
And, this memoir really is, a song of your life. Can you tell us where this song begins? You're from the East Coast, is that correct?
I'm from, New York, obviously.
Can you tell us about growing up in New York? Your father was he from Italy, or? My
father was born in Sicily and came over to Ellis Island on a boat.
Mm-hmm.
He was an immigrant. And so really I'm first generation American on his side and second generation American on my mother's side, because my mother's father and mother were also, my grandmother was German and my grandfather was Cuban. So I'm just a product of immigration here, Thank God for them,
Yeah, and I guess on both sides there is a legacy of progressivism and a lot of political history of political pushback on both sides of your lineage. Your book is striking in that, it's a book of betrayal and abuse. Choices that perhaps weren't the best choice, but choices anyway. But the underlying thread is hope. Why did you write the gravel driveway? What prompted you?
Many people throughout my life always said that I had a crazy story and I needed to tell it, getting married very early at 17 and then divorcing and then remarrying again. So I had kind of a crazy life, and people always said to me I should write a book. But what I did was I was so busy having children and working that I didn't start to write it really until I retired and moved to North Carolina. And that's when I kind of looked at my life, basically, and wondered why I made the decisions I made, why I allowed myself to go through what I went through. And I did allow it. So my question was always why, but my memory was always very poor. So I needed to really look into it and investigate. And look, I was retired now. I had plenty of time. And I was going to start putting it on paper to see if I could get it straight in my head,
So it was a process of, not conjuring, but kind of bringing those memories that had sat inside for such a long time. How painful was that? Because there are people that want to write memoirs, but they can't really, they have a problem dealing with the hurt and the bad situations. I mean, with you dealing with some very extreme violence, domestic violence, how were you able to negotiate that? Were there memories that were hard to remember, or were there things that were repressed and that took a very long time to kind of bring out?
It was very, very difficult because you relive, when you're putting it on paper, you are actually reliving the process that you've gone through, It kind of threw me. It didn't kind of throw me. It did throw me back into PTSD, which I did develop from the second marriage. So the PTSD stayed pretty prevalent for a year or so. I would go in and out of it. And it was very difficult as well for my husband, who kind of was also feeling bad because seeing how I was reacting, of course, it's going to affect him. So it did affect the relationship. It affected everything. It affected my kids. But now going through the process and actually putting it on paper and really reliving it, it's kind of gone, I feel like that writing process is so healing, that when you put it down on paper, it's almost like it's coming out of your body and it's not staying in there anymore,
Yes.
And it stayed in too long. The repressed memories had to be jarred, but I finally got to some of them, not all of it. But it was just an extremely healing process to put it on paper and to get it out.
Yeah, the traumas really kind of last, through a large part of your life. Now, you were married for 10 years.
Right.
And it turned out, well, tell us about that, because I guess you were married. Actually, it was the first husband, and then there was a second husband.
Right.
The one guy had a nice car, but that wasn't quite enough.
Yeah, that wasn't quite enough.
Yeah, can you talk about him? He was the conservative one who had the overbearing mother, and
right. He was actually, we were boyfriend and girlfriend while I was in high school. He was 3 years older than me. We lived in the same town, had the same friends, knew the same people, and suddenly, we've been going out for 3 years. And of course, the first time we have an intimate relationship, which I was 17 years old, I got pregnant. Now, he was way past high school. I had just finished high school, and it was 1964. There was no such thing as abortion in those days. So that wasn't even a thought really at the moment. But he was a very tight, grew up in a community that was pretty wealthy. And he was a very conservative man, cold, distant, controlling. And I was 17 and pregnant. Now, what did I know? So if you see that what my background came from, my mother and father, they didn't teach me any skills. So here I am, 17, pregnant with this very conservative, very tough, cold person. It didn't work, but when I was going out with him, it was fine, but now is a whole different other ballgame. So our marriage really much after 6 months, I kind of left because it was just ridiculous. His mother controlled our lives, and when I gave birth, I was not really even allowed to name my son. She had his name picked out, his godparents picked out. I had no say. And again, I was young, allowed myself to be controlled by this very cold man. He wasn't physically abusive, but he was abusive in many other ways. You don't have to always be physically abusive. just taking the control out of your life, and you have no control of your life, and you're so young and you have a child, what do you do with that?
Was he very much older than you, your first husband?
3 years.
3 years.
So not really. Well, maybe in 17 and he was 20. So maybe at that time it might have been, but it was 1960 in the 60s, so.
Well, they say that history tends to repeat itself. Now, earlier on, with your own parents, I think, there was kind of an age difference between your mother and father.
11 years.
And, they didn't sleep in the same bedroom. And I think that there was an affair. Your mother had an affair, and then you'd known about it.
Right.
So you were the holder of this secret.
Right.
So, on the one hand, there's, just being a naive young girl, but then holding on to a secret, being privy to adult things that had to have had a profound impact on you,
Yeah, well, she told me about her boyfriend when I was like 11. And again, I'm 11. And again, no skills, I had no skills, but except what I came into this life with, But she introduced me to him when I was 11. She took me to lunch with him.
Yes.
And he was a very, very nice man, but I adored my father. And now what am I going to do? Tell my father? No, I couldn't do that, because I wouldn't want to hurt him. So at 11, at least somewhat, I knew that I needed to keep that secret.
Yeah. I mean, that's a very bad situation for a kid to be in, because they're not emotionally ready. You had said something about your crazy life.
Yeah.
It's like, back home, you have some of the Latino writers that call it La Vida Loca. So this is your La Vida.
Really?
This is your La Vida Loca. Now you were under the threat of, and really did experience domestic violence, some real physical violence. It's important to have some kind of support system so that you don't feel totally isolated. And then you had the kids who were also being violated in that way, physically, being hit.
And watching it.
And watching it. So what I want to ask is, did you have any support system? Did they provide any comfort for you? And through that, were you able to get some kind of agency or some kind of strength or confidence through whatever support you were able to get?
I really had a lot of support from friends. My kids were as wounded as I was. When I left him, they were 13, 9, and 8. The kids really didn't know how to give that support either, because they were from this really toxic soup of an environment that was violent practically every single day. But my friends in the neighborhood, and even friends that were my husband's friends, became my friends because they knew him from way back when. They went to school with him. They know he's a horrible human being. And so they supported me. And so I got a lot of support from friends. My mother and my father supported me to a point, but again, there wasn't much they could do, My father would go and talk to him and tell him to stop doing what he's doing. But you can't tell a psychopath to stop what he's doing. It's just an impossible task.
And he was doing a lot of illegal stuff, and he was he was putting you at risk by making you an accomplice, by helping him sell whatever it is he was selling or doing whatever shady dealings.
Or being his getaway driver in the car, something, yes. Yeah,
the chapter is very telling. The Tudor House of Horrors and Our Ultimate Escape, 1967, to August of 1977. So that spans 10 years. Hey, Nancy, would you like to just read a passage from the book? And again, for our listeners, it's The Gravel Driveway, Breaking the Cycle of Abuse by Nancy Sloan, published by Mountain Page Press in Hendersonville.
So I'm going to read an excerpt from the Tudor House of Horrors chapter. The final straw came the night the devil pulled into the gravel driveway like a bat out of hell. We heard the key click open the back door and his footsteps as he entered the house. There was no time to run. The girls were in the bathroom washing their feet. Kelly was sitting on the sink with her feet in it, and Lisa was standing in the sink with one foot in it. Dan came immediately into the bathroom looking for trouble. He was drunk. He began teasing the girls, and neither one was in the mood. Lisa was able to escape the bathroom. She was slick, but Kelly was trapped in there with him. I went into the bathroom to free Kelly. Kelly was mad and talking back, and that's something you never do and get away with. I had to get the girls away from him or something bad was going to happen. The girls managed to leave the bathroom, and Dan cornered them in the den, grabbing both of them by the throat and squeezing hard. Shortly, they were turning blue, and I knew they were in mortal trouble. I had to get them away, so I intervened from behind. I don't remember exactly how, but he dropped his hold on them. He broke glass on the floor, seeing that they were barefoot, to slow them down and resume the torture. I yelled, "Run downstairs." They knew what I meant, to our downstairs tenant, Rosalie, who was our intermittent protector. We all ran down to her apartment in the basement and locked ourselves in. Dan came down banging on the door, but we never opened it. He wouldn't stop until I agreed to come out. I left the girls in Rosalie's care for the rest of the night. What happened when I went upstairs with Dan? I have no memory of what took place and had to rely on my daughter Lisa's memory, who was 9. She was 9 years old at the time, to fill in the detail.
Yes. And again, this is a very riveting, very heartbreaking, very graphic story, but one that really tells of the struggle to really fight. And I think just the metaphor of the gravel driveway and, hearing the sound, you could tell whether Dan was in a good mood or if he was going to, if he was going to be a bat out of hell. I wanted to ask you this, bring this up too. As I was speaking to a friend earlier, and for some reason we brought up the subject of Sigmund Freud and Freudian psychology. Mm-hmm. And one of the things my friend says that she had a problem with Freud was in the way that he diagnosed women, that the women that had been abused, that he often would diagnose them as being hysterical or histrionic. Did you ever experience any people or any feedback that tried to downplay the experience that you were going through? That
No,
you never had that?
Never. I never had that. No. Even when I started with my therapists in New York early on when I was in my 50s, nobody ever tried to downplay at all. Mm-hmm. But then I had a lot of women practitioners too. So, you know.
Well, talk about the practitioners, because I know that, there were shamans and there were different people that you consulted with who were able to kind of guide you to, I guess, to a different space. Right. Can you talk about that journey?
Well, when I moved here to North Carolina, I knew that I wanted to delve a little deeper into why I made the decisions I did, why I traveled the roads that I traveled. I just felt the need to do that. So I've been into New Age, astrology, mediums, all that for many years. I started being interested in astrology when I was a teenager. So when I went to Asheville, it's a very new age community. You can find a lot of help in Asheville. And what I did was I kind of allowed the universe to direct me. So my first thing was that I needed to see an astrologer. So I did. I went to an astrologer. She kind of put me on a road where I should go. She led me. I let one therapist lead me to the next. So now the astrologer led me to a past life reading and a medium. So through that, again, what I do is if I don't know anyone, I go onto Google, I look at their bios, I look at their faces, I see who connects with me. And that's how I chose, whether it worked for me, And so the next was the shaman. After the medium said to me that I needed to go to a shaman because I needed something called a soul retrieval. When you go through a lot of trauma, the protection mechanism is your soul splits and it kind of, the pieces go in different directions. And she told me that I needed to have this soul retrieval. So I searched for a shaman and I found a wonderful shaman in Asheville. And she did amazing things with me. She filled in a lot of my memory gaps. I had fogginess, around certain things. Like I remembered certain things, but pieces of it. And she would fill in the gaps. And I always, people say, how do you know it's real? How do you know it's true? Well, because I've been doing this for a long time, going to these new age therapies. They're not new age, by the way. They're thousands of years old. Shamans have been around forever. But it's a different way to get to the buried stuff that's so deep that that I needed to go that avenue. And that's the avenue. And from the shaman, I went to a somatic therapist. The somatic therapist is also amazing. That's something that abuse happens to you before language. Your body holds on to it. And because you have no way of expressing it, you're too young. And being that my abuse started in the crib with my sister, then, it just, she says, the way you carry yourself, everything has to do with body language. You put it inside and usually your posture is bad and you're tight. And that's exactly me and full of chronic pain. And I'm bent over, So I believed everything was just unbelievable. I mean, there are more therapies in the book, but I went from one to another and I let each one lead me to the next one.
Well, this is going to be inspiring for people that might be experiencing that. This will provide a roadmap and, to some comfort. The other thing I wanted to ask you too was, during the process of writing, you're writing about, people that are very close, relatives, people that you've been intimate with. How hard was that process? Because, I've heard writers say that, hey, I had a hard time writing about this person, being a real person out there and writing about trauma. Were there any challenges and anything in the process of writing it that you discovered perhaps?
Well, yes, it was very difficult writing about certain family members. My children, their stories are their stories to tell. But when I was growing up and I had a sister and a brother, yes, it was very difficult to tell their secrets as well. But you know what? I wanted the book to be about truth. I actually wanted them exposed for the truth instead of hiding it, Enough with this hiding, enough with the lies, enough with all of that. I just needed the truth to be out. And my mother being, she had an incestuous father. She had two sisters who also were, abused by their father. And I've been told in readings that this book will heal them. And that's very, very important for me, because those three women just were very sad women. It was sad.
Yeah, the book really, a roller coaster.
Yes.
I'm still reading it. I feel like I'm on a roller coaster with you as I'm reading it. You had the book launch.
Yes.
In Hendersonville a couple of weeks ago at the Second Act coffee shop. Tell us you have another one coming up in the East Coast. Is that correct?
I'm going to New York because I'm going to see my new granddaughter. And
congratulations.
Thank you. And I contacted, there was a big bookstore in Huntington that has been there for many, many years that kind of had to move its location. So I just got in contact with them, and they're very into it. So we're trying to make these arrangements now. It'll probably be the end of July, the beginning of August, and it'll be in Huntington, New York. And it'll be the bookstore is called The Next Chapter.
The Next Chapter in Huntington? You said Huntington?
In Huntington, yes.
Huntington, New York.
Yes.
The next chapter.
The next chapter. Yes.
The next chapter.
Yes.
Okay, and that's going to be your second.
That'll be my second event.
Again, this is a wonderful book, The Gravel Driveway, and this is The Gravel Driveway: Breaking the Cycle of Abuse. It's published by Mountain Page Press. And that's based here in Hendersonville. Nancy Sloan, of course, is a local writer. She lives in Hendersonville. Tell us how folks can get in contact with you, or if they want to pick up a copy of your book.
The Gravel Driveway is sold on Amazon, also Barnes & Nobles. And you can contact me at ncs2200@aol.com. And we could chat. If you need to buy a book or you want me to sign a book for you, I'll make myself available. And that's it.
That's ncs2200@aol.com. They want to get in touch with you. You want to get the book. Again, it's on Amazon.com. It's also on Barnes and Noble. You might want to check Mountain Page Press as well, since they are the publisher. Mountain Page Press really specializes in memoirs, and they've published memoirs from many local authors in Hendersonville and in the surrounding areas and beyond. So again, Nancy Sloan, thank you so much. I mean, it's really been wonderful speaking with you and meeting your husband Tom, and a couple of your children, Tony. And it's just been wonderful. I wish you really all the success in the world with this, and best of luck with your homecoming, in Huntington, for the reading on the East Coast. It's going to be fantastic, and I'm sure that this book is going to provide some comfort. It'll show people what's possible, what can be done, how you can really reclaim some agency for oneself. And I do love the cover. Right. The cover is really striking,
It is. And I wanted it to project hope, and I think the cover does,
Yes. Nancy Sloan, thank you so much. We appreciate it. Best of luck with you. Again, this is Listen and Be Heard Radio on 103.7 FM, WPVM, the voice of Asheville. And now we're going to toss it back to Martha in the studio. Martha.
Thank you, Tony. Let's listen to a little music first. This is Babatunde Lee from a CD called Level of Intent, and the cut is called Little Girls. We'll listen to this and then we'll go on to an interview that Tony Robles did with Tiny of the Poor News Network and Robert Zachary. That was from drummer Babatunde Lee, Level of Intent. For a while, Babatunde and I both lived in Vallejo, California, master percussionist. And then we both moved on to other places. But this CD features Babatunde with Kenny Barron, Hilton Ruiz, Tommy James, Charnette Moffett, Santi Debriano, John Faddis, Frank Lacey, John Purcell, Frank Colon, and Marvin Horn, all great jazz players from around the country. And he played at Listen and Be Heard Poetry Cafe several times with several different groups. And it was a thing to see, to watch Babatunde set up his drum set. I really used to enjoy that. He had a lot of different drums and also various percussive instruments. And I think most drummers are very particular about the way they set up their sets. And he used to arrive early, especially it was a whole thing about his cymbals, which are, of course, important and precious to every jazz drummer, as they will testify to you if you know any. You're tuned to WPVM 103.7 in Asheville, North Carolina. My name is Martha Senator, and I'm the co-host along with Tony Robles of Listen and Be Heard. Listen and Be Heard radio is about what it sounds like, listening and being heard. We want to speak to and be heard by and listen to everyone, but we have a focus on readers and writers. And I was thinking, I need to add to that line that also we have a focus on listeners and speakers. The roots of Listen and Be Heard are in spoken word and poetry. As I mentioned, I used to have a poetry cafe out in the Bay Area, and before that, it was an open mic event in New York City. And now it's a radio show / podcast. We started out as a podcast and we still are. And you can find the podcast at listenandbeheard.net. We have every show archived. We're up to episode 20 now. But along the way, we asked Davian Dial, the general manager here at WPVM, if we could do our show at this station and get to know Asheville, have Asheville get to know us. And she very graciously accepted that request and has been patiently training me, which I really appreciate, because I used to do radio at WBAI, but I had a wonderful engineer, Matthew Finch, so I never used to have to think about the board, but now I do. But so now we're going to go on. We have a very full show, and I'm going to play an interview for you that Tony Robles did with Tiny of the Poor News Network and Robert Zachary, who is based in Hendersonville.
Hey, thank you, Martha, and welcome to Listen and Be Heard Radio on WPVM 103.7 FM. Check us out online. We have a website. It's called listenandbeheard.net. Again, listenandbeheard.net. Hit the subscribe button. We have lots of interviews. We have lots of content that you'll find helpful. We have close to maybe 600 subscribers. We'd like to get 1,000. So again, listenandbeheard.net. First off, we're going to dedicate this show to Dolores Wright. Now, she's an elder in Fountainhead, South Carolina, who's fighting to keep her home from the hands of greedy developers. Her family has had a piece of land in her family that goes back to the Civil War days, and developers are trying to grab that land from her. It's been all over the news, so if you get a chance to look into it and check it out, again, her name is Dolores Wright. And that being said, social justice and poetry and art really go hand in hand, or should go hand in hand. Our next guests really live those words. I'd like to introduce two of our guests. Robert Zachary, who I know, is an independent chaplain and inspirational poet, storyteller, visionary, and activist. His presentations combine life, music, poetry, history, and storytelling with positive and holistic perspectives of how we will win our fight for freedom, justice, and peace. He's also founder of the Love Healing Institute. And also, our guest today is Tiny, Lisa Gray Garcia, a.k.a. Tiny, a.k.a. the Poverty Scholar, who is a formerly unhoused, incarcerated revolutionary journalist, lecturer, poet, visionary, teacher, and single mama of Tibucio, daughter of a houseless, disabled mama, and the co-founder of Poor Magazine, Prensa Pobre, and Poor News Network. With her mama, Mama D, the late Mama D, rest in peace, she co-founded Escuela de la Gente, also known as People's School, which is a poor and indigenous people-led school, as well as several cultural and theater projects that are underway right now. Thank you for being with us. Robert, let me start with you. You've been involved with the Poor People's Campaign. I know that the Poor People's Campaign started a long time ago, started 1968. It's had a resurgence in recent years. Can you just tell us, your background in the Poor People's Campaign? And you just got back from the Poor People's Congress. Can you talk about what went on up there in Washington, D.C.?
I do have to give accolades and honor to Dr. William Barber for the resurgence of the Poor People Campaign. We never forgot the Poor People Campaign started by Martin Luther King and the great Jose Williams in Memphis, Tennessee, and were organizing to move across the country and superseding the whole issue of race and really highlighting the plight of all people who were in poverty, and that more white people were in poverty than Black folk. Dr. Barber started out with the NAACP in North Carolina, the Moral Monday movement around 2012, 2013, and gravitated into a national movement. They have been meeting over the years with a Congress in Washington, D.C. I went this year. It was around June the 19th to the 22nd, around 800 people, a lot of teaching and training, a lot of recognition of those who've gone on, especially through COVID, and a day of planning. The basis of the Poor People Campaign is to show that poverty is the fourth leading cause of death in this country. And it is not registered with the CDC. It is not recognized in that way as a cause of death. And that's one thing that the Congress is pushing forth, is to go forward and lay a bill before Congress where it can be recognized as that.
Tiny, one of the core values that Poor Magazine does have is this value of community reparations. Can you speak to that in terms of just the overall picture? Because, what Robert was saying, going to Congress and doing this and that. And then, we just had a Supreme Court that struck down affirmative action that, it seems like we're always fighting this uphill battle. Can you maybe speak to that and some of the work that Poor is doing on the West Coast?
Yeah, and thank you, Robert, for your beautiful energy and your work.
Thank you.
I always start by saying I'm a poverty scholar, that houseless mama, that houseless daughter, all those people you don't want to see, never want to be, look away from me. What you going to do? North Carolina, Oakland, LA, arrest me. We're in your city. I rock my jailhouse attire because me and my poor mama did jail time. 3 months county jail time for the poverty crime of being unhoused in this occupied indigenous hollow. Lifting up my mama D. Afro Boricua, ghetto scholar for without whom there be no me, from the streets of Philly. I do want to just inject, as we talk about the Poor People's Campaign, we cannot fail to mention the Poor People's Economic Human Rights Campaign out of Philly, Sherry Honkala, Willie Baptist, Galen, and so many more, who was the precursor of that movement, actually, that Barbara is working with now and doing beautiful things. It is important, of course, to walk into the settler colonial halls of politics, as I call it, and make sure that they know that we're dying. And this is something that I see, work with, stand with my whole life. We have lost members of our movement. We're a poor and houseless people-led movement. In line with the Zapatistas of Chiapas, the Movimiento Sin Tierra of Brazil, Move Africa, Long Live John Africa, in the sense that we are self-determination. But in trying to build this movement, we have lost members to the very thing that you're talking about, Robert, because poverty kills, homelessness kills. The lie of sweeping humans like we're trash kills us. Ibaye, Kathy Galvez, Laurie McElroy, Ibaye, my mama, Ibaye, our Shannon Marie Bigley, Luis Demetrio, Gongora Pat, and so many more. But I have to say that I always say that I fight and I build. Because if as we fight and walk into those halls of politics, we also have to recognize that we also have power, and we have power to create our own. Because at the end of the day, oftentimes they're going to do what they're going to do, and we're going to be outside. And so we're actually working to build a homeless people solution to homelessness that we call homefulness. And one of the important pieces around that is that it's rooted in self-determination, and it's rooted in building what we can in our community, along with First Nations leadership, because this is not our land. We are all settlers. Peoples were stolen from Mama Africa to come here and build this mess. And that's why, in my mind, they're taking the little last crumb that they threw down, AKA affirmative action, so that these halls of AKKdemia, as I call it, can turn back into the lily white eugenist institutions they always were. But I digress. The thing is that what Tony brought up about community reparations and what I call radical redistribution is something that we have worked on to teach young people and all people with different forms of race and class privilege, with hoarded and occupied wealth, to radically redistribute to those of us who have none. Because we can't wait for these politricksters to make a move. We can't lose more of our relatives on these occupied streets. And so these are big ideas, but we have done them. What Tony talked about in terms of people school, as he started us out today, is something that we do to a poor people-led school to teach what we call poverty scholarship, which is the idea that I am connected to you because you are my brother or sister, and I cannot practice what I call the violent act of looking away. That we are entwined, and therefore, ultimately, all of us as humans, but specifically indigenous peoples, Black and brown peoples, have always practiced interdependence, not the cult of independence. I got mine, I'm good. I don't need to look back. I don't need to worry about you. Well, actually, that's not That's not human, and that's not humanity, right? And so as we talk about how to resist poverty, how to come out of it, how to survive it, we also, and that's why I love the name of your institute, we also recognize that we have to constantly heal from this trauma, of not only white supremacy and settler colonial theft, but also the ongoing crumbs, scarcity models that we have to live with as poor people. We have actually built 14 homes, a healing center, a liberation school, right here in an intentionally blighted poor people color neighborhood in Deep East Tuchin.
Robert, I know one of the things that you said, because I had spoken to you before about some of the communities in the past, that I think the term you used was that some of the communities were money poor, but land rich. And I think, a lot of this has to do with access to land, access to, because with that, you have agency, and with that, you have spirit, and you have confidence, and you have, the ability to walk with pride, right? Spiritual pride. Can you talk about your institute? Because it seems a lot of the work that you're doing is to build that spirit up, because communities have been beaten down for so long.
We have come to the point of understanding that we need, and this is what the Institute pushes, we need to gravitate on and ring the bells of how we have come and the successes and the positivity and the fact that they set out to kill us all, but we hear in more number than it starts. And so,
That's right. Hey, Robert, thank you.
Estamos y no nos vamos. Sorry.
I wanted to bring in my late uncle, Al Robles, who is an ancestral board member of Poor Magazine. And he said, because both of you are poets, both of you are artists. And what he said he says that, to tell the truth, he says that we must be more than mere poets. We must stand up for the rights of our people against the injustices brought upon them. He also says that we are not solitary figures. We cry out for freedom and social change. Do we seek glory? For our poverty of our life is so long overdue. The revolt in our hearts is pure. We wanted to live like human beings, whatever the cost, whatever the dreams. So what is our dream? To liberate our people together, a strong poetical voice, present and waiting to break loose. So, that being said, Tiny, I wanted to toss it back to you. Homefulness is a beautiful thing. I know that there's Homefulness 2 that's kicking off right now in East Oakland. And, this idea, this core value of community reparations, you were able to get, I guess it was a solidarity board of people with race and class privilege. And I bring that up because, in this part of the country, there was slavery, there was all kinds of stuff, not just here, but all over the place. And a lot of wealth was generated. And can you talk about the connection with Solidarity Board, or the people that have supported the work that Poor Magazine has done over the years, in terms of reparations and getting some of that wealth back into the hands of the people?
I think that the key piece to go back to is Mama Earth needs to be liberated. The teachings of all of our ancestors, which is that we have all the things we need, right? That these scarcity models make us poor, right? That not only the pride, the spirit, the deep structure of community that you all had, and that many of our communities have, is transformed into, it's transformed into trauma, it's transformed into struggle, partly because we're surviving and trying to thrive within a system that is intentionally broken to break us. So I just wanted to go back to that, because as we are doing this work of homefulness, it is going back to Mama Earth. And it's right. and it's going back to abundance. It's following the teachings, and actually actual teachings, because our elder family council includes not only Black Panthers and warriors in our community, but also First Nations relatives of this territory, right? Who have never believed that Mama Earth is for sale, who have never believed that she's a commodity, right? And so one of my things that I say all the time, hashtag unsell Mama Earth. And it goes back to what you asked. I also don't want to get it twisted at all. As poor people who don't even got 2 nickels to rub together, at least urban. So I feel you on folks in the South who might have had a little something, or like you said, maybe all they had is a front stoop. Out here in the urban reality, we lucky we have a stoop or maybe a tent. I'm so serious. The price of rent is impossible. Project housing has been destroyed. Thank you. Actually, believe it or not, Politrix, that's the one that did it. The housing director, unfortunately, under Brother Obama, was the one who dismantled. It was called RAD. Me and Tone actually did the research on it back in 2013. So the housing and safety for the poorest among us, unfortunately, is not here. But what we are doing is that when we teach those folks with hoarded and stolen wealth and occupied land and inheritors, and I'm talking about usually pretty much white people or wealthy people of color, about radical redistribution, we're doing it so that us poor folks can actually get back little spots of Mama Earth and actually build our own. There would be no way that me and my ma, who were living in the backseat of our car, the doorways, bus shelters, motels, if we could pull some money together, there'd be no way that we could ever, quote unquote, buy land. And what we did as at least about 45 of us houseless folks and poor people and elders and ancestors like Uncle Al, and Tone was involved with us as one of the longtime members of POOR and his family, is that we actually put their money together and bought a small part of Mama Earth so that we could build mindfulness. And I never like to not include that. So I thank you, Tone, for bringing it up, because they're not giving us that money easily. They're not saying, oh, you're right. We stole all your land and all your money, and we used your backs to build all these that we thrive off of. So let's share. No. Doesn't work like that. And one of the things I say is it's a calling in, not a calling out, because we've all been lied to about hoarding and stealing and occupying. So even the white peoples with all that hoarded wealth, I don't blame them. They've been lied to that same way. It might be the descendants of these evildoers, but the reality is they've also been taught, you got to get your piece of property, and you got to, then get more and more and more and more, because that's how you prove that you're successful in a capitalist system. So how do we unteach that lie?
Yes. I know that we could go on for probably another 10 hours, but we are on radio, and we do have our time constraints. Robert, appreciate you being on our show. Tiny, much love. Really appreciate you being on our show as well. Robert, Love Healing Institute. We can find that online. And then
Healing Love.
Healing Love Institute. Yes. Healing Love Institute. And Tiny Poor Magazine. That's poormagazine.org. Is there, for homefulness, for people that want to get involved with that, Tiny, is there a place that they can get in contact with?
Yeah, well, I'd say, first of all, Robert, I'd be honored to publish some of your poetry on Poor Magazine. Check us out.
Oh, wow.
Love what you're doing.
Sure.
Also, if you ever come to Oakland, you have a home. So check us out.
All right.
There's a lot of powerful things we're doing. And for folks who are interested, we do need support. poormagazine.org/homefulness with one L. You can also look up on YouTube. There's a lot of powerful videos. And we're actually right now raising money to buy the homes that we're going to be putting on Homefulness 2 right here on Black Arthur in Deep East Oakland.
All right. Thank you two so much for sharing with us. And again, this is Listen and Be Heard Radio, WPVM 103.7 FM. And check out our website, listenandbeheard.net. And we're going to toss it back to Martha in the studio. Thank you.
Thank you, Tony. And I'm going to take you now to a little more music for the soul. This is Zelia Duncan.
Quero sua boca no meu rosto, sorrindo pra mim. Não quero seus olhares, quero os seus cílios nos meus olhos, piscando pra mim. Transfere pro meu corpo seus sentidos pra eu sentir a sua dor, os seus gemidos, entender por quê quero você. Não quero seu suor, quero os seus poros na minha pele, explodindo de calor. Transfere pro meu corpo seus sentidos pra eu sentir a sua dor, os seus gemidos, entender por quê quero você. Não quero seu sorriso, quero sua boca no meu rosto, sorrindo pra mim. Não quero seu suor, quero os seus poros na minha pele, explodindo de calor. Transfere pro meu corpo seus sentidos pra eu sentir a sua dor, os seus gemidos, entender por quê quero você. Quero você, quero você.
Okay, this is Tony Robles again. I'm here with Jose Case, local celebrity, mainstay here on Main Street. A year or so ago, I ran into Jose, and I wrote this poem about him, and I'm going to read it to him here because he's standing right next to me, and he's looking at me saying, "Hey, this better be damn good." This is called, and this is a poem for Jose. It's called Earth, Wind, and Jose. Okay. The earth is underneath, and the wind is dragging in humidity's slow pull. I tend not to look down upon the earth as it tends to tend to my needs. Between earth and wind is Jose, a mainstay on Main Street, strums a ukulele and breathes life into a harmonica. In a world whose frequencies are off-key, less than harmonious, the surrounding trees move. The clouds stop in their patterns. In every city, there's a Jose. But there's only one group of mountains called Blue Ridge. One moon, one sun, one Jose. Thank you, my brother. Gracias. Gracias, my brother.
Excellent. Excellent.
Hey, thank you, Martha. And this is WPVM 103.7 FM in Asheville. And today we are in Hendersonville, North Carolina, which is not too far from Asheville. And we have a special guest today who, when I think of Hendersonville, North Carolina, and I've only been here a couple of years. I've only been living here like close to 4 years. If somebody were to ask me, hey, what's the first thing that comes to your mind if you think of Hendersonville, I would think of a brother named Jose. Jose Case is his name, and I'd like to welcome you to our show, Jose.
Hey, hello, guys. Glad to be here with y'all.
Jose, you've been in the newspapers, in like the Blue Ridge newspapers. I've heard you on different radio stations, and you've been described as a local celebrity here in Hendersonville. Tell us about that. Do you consider yourself a celebrity? I mean, when I first saw you, you were out, you're a street musician. Tell us about that, and just your life here in Hendersonville.
I've always loved the arts and music. I've always been around food, art, and music. People know that I've been a chef. I've done music. I've been a musician. I've done art. My art has been in different parts, different places, different areas, not just in Hendersonville, throughout different other areas of our state. Mm-hmm. Same thing with the cooking. And so I do a lot of unique, interesting stuff. And, people have known that I've helped out different benefits. I've been involved with Thrive. I've been involved with Boys and Girls Scouts, Boy Scouts, Boys and Girls, Big Brother, Big Sister, different organizations I've been involved with. And I'm glad I'm able to do those things and be grateful that I can do those things. And even though I have to get out there and work just like everyone else, I still try to make effort to do those interesting projects or things that are able where I can help out and do. And it's a benefit it's a win-win all the way, because everybody, not only you benefit as a person, but also the community or the communities around you benefit, because you're trying to do something worthwhile.
Yeah.
And that's the most important. Make it worthwhile.
I was reading a little bit about you. Now you moved to Hendersonville at the age of 8, correct? And you were born in Costa Rica?
Yeah, I saw you got
Yeah. I printed out the news clip. Tell us about that, because people, they look at you as a local celebrity, as homegrown, but there's a whole other side to that. Yeah. Talk to us a little bit about that, because there are people in this community, they may not know that.
I have a very interesting background, because my mother was Costa Rican. And when she was Costa Rican, even though she was Costa Rican, she did have a lot of German in her. Mm-hmm. So imagine I have a Costa Rican, Cherokee, German, and there's a few Norwegians inside my tree too. So that's a very interesting background.
Yeah.
And my father was a native for me, and he did have a lot of Cherokee. You can look at my dad, you can tell he had a lot of Cherokee. He was bigger than me.
Was your father born in Hendersonville?
Yes.
Yeah.
98% of his family was born. I would say, let's say 99.9 of his family was born in Hendersonville. Mm-hmm. So technically, I'm like a copy of my father, except a smaller version.
Yeah.
Where I got the dark hair, he had more of the blonde hair.
Yeah. And what about
he looked more like a bike?
And what about family back in Costa Rica? Have you do you have like contact with them, or what are some of the?
Well, there's a lot of relatives out there. There's aunts and cousins. They're still out there. They come and visit, and when they have a chance. And
have you been back there since you came out here?
Many. Last time I was there was maybe like 35 years ago. Mm-hmm. A long time.
And what do you remember? What do you remember about that? Because I know some folks that who were Latino who came over when they were kids, and then they visited again, and you kind of gave them a different perspective on their life here. Tell us about that.
A lot of my Costa Rican childhood a lot of my Costa Rican childhood had a lot of effect throughout my life. And so I've always tried to bring out I always try to bring out the best of wherever I'm at. I try to bring out the best of the Costa Rican people, try to bring out the best of the Cherokee people, try to bring out the best of the German people, try to bring out the best of those elements that have.
So that all the elements that make up who you are, right?
Right. Yeah. Try to bring out the best qualities as an individual.
Yeah.
And that's what we should strive for.
Yeah.
So, yes, I am choosy what I'm going to do, right? Because you've been around me. I'm very picky on what I'm going to do.
Yeah.
I'm choosy. I'm not trying to be hard to be hard. I'm very particular when I do something. I have that mindset. Very particular what I'm going to do. I think about what I'm going to do. And then I'm trying to see, is it worth doing or it's not? It's worth doing if I'm interested in the project is appealing, interesting, it's worthwhile, and it's worth doing. I'm for it. If it's something that's not worth doing, my answer is going to be right up no. And a person can try to twist my arm and go, you got to do it. I says, I'm not doing it. Why are you not doing it? Because I'm not feeling it, man.
Yeah.
It's not good. If it's no bueno, I ain't going to do it. Yeah. Show me something that's worthwhile.
Yeah.
I don't care what background. Show me something that's background. Show me what's worthwhile. And if it's good, I'm interested.
Well, I see you at the library quite a bit too. And you always kind of struck me as somebody that was, I guess they had an appreciation for philosophy, appreciation for knowledge and philosophy and history.
Like history
yeah, tell us about your, the books, some of the books that you're reading, some of the books that have influenced you, some of the stuff that you like to read.
Well, I would say educators have influenced me a lot. Like, I would say one of my uncles, who is from Costa Rica, from my mother's side, he was an educator. He taught high school in Costa Rica. He taught college level in Costa Rica. He taught in private.
And this is your
This is one of my uncles.
Okay.
From my mother's side.
Yeah.
And so there were 2 or 3 educators from my mother's side, but also there was a good artists and musicians on that side from my mother's side. So I guess from her side, I would say the art and the music and the food and from her side, right? And then my father was really more, since he's a good old mountain boy from North Carolina and very Hendersonville native, to the core, in mountainish, he was very harsh, but very disciplinary. And I have to say things about him. He could be very rough, but sometimes he did it kind of a little overboard.
Being kind of like a local celebrity, I don't know if I don't know if that's describing you accurately, but you do,
It kind of makes me laugh, but not to make fun. You know, I'm trying to be serious about it without laughing. You know what I mean? You know what I'm saying? But it kind of chuckles me. But in a way, I'll let people what they think. At least it's positive. So they're thinking me of a positive way. I got no problem with that.
Yeah. Well,
I got no problem with that. Anytime people look at you in a positive way, should be grateful for that.
Well, okay.
Oh, really?
I read where a couple years ago, Hendersonville dedicated a day to you. I think it was Jose Day. Tell us about that, and also tell us about your mopeds, because you had a couple mopeds that broke down, and then I think somebody in the community did a GoFundMe campaign. They got your your new one. Tell us about the scooters.
Okay, let me tell you about the scooter. Okay, there's so many. See, again, even the scooters have their own story. I don't know if it's as complex as my life biography, but even the scooters have their own complex story. And it's so interesting. The first bike that I ever had, I bought. Okay. And actually, it was, I would say, like my stepfather, the other man, and he died doing combat. And my dad was still around. My stepfather was going to go, to me, he's like, because he used to know me as a boy, okay? So I include him just like another dad, all right? My real dad plus one more dad. Yeah. All right, what I'm saying? Yeah. See where I'm getting at?
Yeah.
Okay, see where I'm getting. So he goes out, he says, I don't want to get you, and I says, I'll buy it from. So what he did, he went and he bought my first scooter. It was a Chinese. Chinese. And then later on, it got wrecked. It got hit. And that particular bike, it looked great, color and all, but once it got hit, it started going worse and worse and worse. For a while there, I was pushing the thing. And the second bike that I had, that was where the fundraiser came in. That was the CP3. The CP3, dude, which looked like a motorcycle. And I had that for quite a while. And eventually, I said, that one got stolen. It did. Then I got which I have now, I had a Honda. Okay. The Honda, that was to the community. I used that Honda till it couldn't run anymore. You remember it was a blue and white Honda? I don't know if you remember that. It was
I remember that.
Blue and white. Yeah. I ran it till it could not run anymore, right? I had almost 67,000 miles on it, which is a lot for it. No, so I ran it till it couldn't, it died. It went kaput. It died, okay? And then that's where the Raucous comes in. So, the only of the bikes that I have here left is that Raucous that you see me now, the white one. And I always I turn my bikes to like sculptures. You see me do it through the years. Even when I had bicycles, I turn them into sculptures and run them. Right. So each of my designs are so different. Some of them could be complex, simple. Some of them, what is it? Some of them you figure it out. And some of them you go, that's interesting.
I was wondering if you would care to do a song for us on your ukulele or your guitar.
Okay. Just something to come up with.
Yeah.
Hello, I'm happy to be here with you and share my story. A little bit of knowledge, a little bit of happiness, a little bit of trials on my mind, and the good things and bad things that happens every day. Good, bad, whatever happens, but no matter what, we must do our best, whatever we do, and do it full-hearted. Thank you.
Right on.
There you go.
Jose, thank you so much. We appreciate your time. And anyway, for our listening audience, if you do come to Hendersonville, you might see Jose on Main Street. He's a good brother. Say hello. Drop a couple of bills in the cup if he has that going. But Jose, thank you so much for being with us.
Nashville Steel Mountain, because it's part of the mountain.
Right on.
We're mountain boys.
Right on.
Mountain boys. That's mountain area.
So hey, that'll be Yeah, thanks a lot, Jose. And Martha, back to you.
Thank you, Tony. That was local celebrity in Hendersonville, Jose Case. Interesting stuff. Everything that we've listened today somehow kind of had some connections from talking to Laurie Stone about feminism, moving on to Nancy Sloan, who talked about her own experience, and really back in that time that she was talking about, women had a lot less options, so it's very much related to what I was talking about with Laurie, I think. Excuse me. And I found a lot of what Tiny said from the Poor News Network very interesting and somehow related to what I wanted to start to talk about with you now, which is she was talking about Mama Earth needs to be liberated. And I have been talking to you a couple weeks ago. I started with this series based on a book that I wrote about 12 years ago that was never published. And I'm looking at it now, having been divorced in the meantime and changing my whole outlook about how to manage the property that I live on. And I really hear, what Tiny was saying and feel that about our relationship with Mother Earth. And so I'm trying to come to terms with that and see how I can approach that where I live, which is at Martha's Kitchen Garden in Greenville, South Carolina. So I'm going to read to you a little more from that. Reading from a journal entry included in a 12-year-old manuscript that was meant to be a book but never became one can be a challenge to my perception of who I would like to be. I am 60. Who I would like to believe is me now is a different contemplation from a young woman who doesn't know yet who she will turn out to be or be turned out to be, or the middle-aged, married, and harried mother I was on June 24th, 2011, when I wrote what now offends my idea about how I should have been. That woman used work to fill the silent void that was sucking on her fantasy life like a black hole dragging down starlight. Here's how my day started about 12 years ago. I made myself a coffee, clipped cilantro and laid it in the herb dryer, strung together about 20 jalapeno peppers and hung them in the pantry before he appeared with a scowl creasing his forehead and drove off without a word. I started beets to boiling in a water bath canner and looked up some cucumber recipes. I decided on soup. Now, anyone reading that journal entry might ask, why was he angry? Why didn't he say anything? Is he leaving or will he come back? Is it her fault? I could ask the same question because I don't remember. Most likely, I didn't know what I did wrong anyway. I worked obsessively to keep myself from ruminating over the many ways I tried and failed to communicate with my husband, which wasn't always effective because mostly I was working in isolation, my thoughts free to torture me without interruption. But I didn't want to talk about it in my journal or with myself. The decisions to come or go, be angry or not, I left in his hands. I decided on cucumber soup. But that was just the beginning of that day. I go on to list more activities. While the boiled beets were cooling, I poured my homemade yogurt over a cheesecloth. Then I mixed shredded cucumber, raw garlic, mint, dill, and vinegar, and put that in the fridge. Then I started the pickling sauce for the beets. This time I tried a cinnamon recipe I found with allspice, clove, apple cider vinegar, and sugar. While that was simmering, I peeled the boiled beets. I chopped them up just as the water bath came to a boil. I filled the sterilized jars with the cut-up beets, poured the cinnamon vinegar sauce over, and put them in the water bath to boil for half an hour. Then I called the kids into the kitchen to fix themselves some lunch. While they ate, I cut up leftover chicken in cubes to use for pizza for dinner, and then I decided to make another batch of yogurt since I used so much for the cucumber soup and needed to use up the milk too. So I started the milk heating up, got out the yogurt maker, found some yogurt cups and lids. By then the beets were done. After the milk just almost came to a boil, I turned it off and went down to the field to pick green tomatoes and green bell peppers to cut up later in the evening for chow chow. When I got back to the kitchen, I added some yogurt to the cooled milk, stirred it up, and poured it into the cups and put them in the warm yogurt maker. I must remember to take them out before I go to bed. Then I started the pizza dough. Then we went to the supermarket and I bought red bell peppers and sweet onions also for the chow chow. To hear me talk, you would think I had ever made it before. I'm just trying out a recipe I found online that sounds something like what his mother used to make, according to what he remembers seeing her do. Now that's the fantasy life I'm talking about. Partly his fantasy life, that I do everything the way his mother did it. The thing is, I think he was making some of that up as he went along. But what was there in that fantasy for me that I was willing to give it agency? I wasn't just absorbed in a distraction, and I wouldn't call everything I have learned hands-on over the years about gardening, cooking, and preserving an obsession. Ultimately, it was my salvation. I was intensely engaged in a return to the wisdom of our collective mothers. My relationship with Mother Earth sustains my spirit now in a way that my marriage never did. But my focus has shifted from feeding 3 growing boys and a grown man to restoration of the degraded landscape and resilience in the face of climate change. It has a new kind of urgency as we humans experience the hottest week ever on Earth. I am turning to dehydrating and fermentation as replacements for using electricity to keep things frozen. Back in 2011, I still had a freezer. When I got back from buying bell peppers, I dug into the freezer and found some broccoli, which I steamed, and I cut up some onions and mushrooms and olives. When the dough was ready, I rolled it out, put it on my preheated pizza stone, spread some tomato sauce, my cut-up ingredients, some shredded mozzarella, and popped it in the oven. Then I repeated with the rest of the dough, made a salad, of course, combined the cucumber soup ingredients from the fridge, and dinner was ready. A good thing because I hadn't eaten all day. I didn't like the raw garlic so much in the cucumber soup, though. After dinner, I chopped up all the ingredients for the chow chow, put them in a big pot with pickling salt and hot water, and left that to sit overnight. Then there was the cleanup, the compost, the pool check, and finally, a shower. Sitting by myself while he sat in the TV room. This is my life right now. At 7 a.m., it will be time to start the process with the chow chow. Maybe I'll sleep better tonight. Last night, I dreamt there were wild animals roaming in our field, and the children were in danger. Wild animals indeed. What I don't like about that woman is her seeming passivity. The children were in danger, but not from the wild animals roaming the field that my husband claimed for his domain, telling me to stay in my lane, the kitchen, making things he wanted to eat, things I had never even tasted before. The wild animals were me, restless in a cage that I didn't see when I entered it, and helpless to protect my children while under its roof. Now, that wild woman as a water protector. She stitches soil and breaks sourdough bread and is working hard on not working so hard. 'Cause I'm a wild rose who I can appreciate now for itself, without fertilizing, without admirers, and without expectations. You are tuned to WPVM 103.7 FM, the voice of Asheville. My name is Martha Senator, and I'm the co-host along with Tony Robles of Listen and Be Heard. And I've been with you for almost the last 2 hours, listening to interesting people and hopefully being heard. We started with Laurie Stone, who you can read more of her work and more about at lauriestone.substack.com. And after that, we heard Tony Robles interview Nancy Sloan, author of The Gravel Driveway. And if you happen to be in Huntington, New York later this month, she'll be appearing at the next chapter, and that book is published by Mountain Page Press in Hendersonville. And then we heard Tony interview Tiny from the Poor News Network, which you can look up online, and they have Poor News TV, Poor News Radio. They have a whole website publication, so there's a lot of depth there for you to dive into. And he also spoke at the same time with Robert Zachary of the Healing Love Institute in Hendersonville as well. And then there's the celebrity of Hendersonville, Jose Case, who you could go find on Main Street if you happen to be visiting there. I want to thank Jay Rodriguez for all the wonderful background music, the loops, and the all-original music that he provides to me just for this show, Listen and Be Heard. That interview that Tony did with Tiny and Robert, it was actually much longer, like at least a half hour longer than what I aired. But I will be posting it soon at listenandbeheard.net. And you can go back and look at a lot of other unedited videos that Tony has done by Zoom interviews with people all over the country. Robert was in Hendersonville and Tiny was in Oakland, California when he spoke to them. So if you want to hear more of that whole conversation, Robert goes more into the history of what the Healing Love Institute does and what his whole concept of that is. Then go to listenandbeheard.net, and I will soon be posting some older interviews that I still haven't gotten to. The video editing is a job in itself, but I will soon be also posting that interview that he did with Darren Todd. And while you're there, please subscribe so that we can keep you updated about the who's going to be our next guests on the show, as well as the columns that are posted there at listenandbeheard.net. It's a magazine as well as a place to listen to our archived shows and to look at videos and to read poetry. So I hope that you will go there, listenandbeheard.net. And thank you to Tony for joining me in producing this show. Next week, I am doing a 2-hour special talking about nothing else. Well, all around the 12 points of what we can all do to affect climate change and to prepare to be resilient in the face of increasingly volatile weather. I will be joined by Laura Lingnick, our local expert who wrote a book called Resilient Agriculture, and Meredith Lee, who talks about ethical meat production and charcuterie. And we're going to go over those 12 points with you on the air and talk about how we can all, as artists, as writers, as thinkers, as readers, listeners, talkers, help to spread the word, the correct messages about climate change and what we can do about it. So I hope you will join me next week. Until then, oh, and one more thing. Please let me hear from you. Email me at editor@listenandbeheard.net. Let me know what you think of the show, what you would like to hear on the show, what you don't like hearing on the show. It's nice to know that we're being heard. Thank you for listening. Having it to give. Taking it. Moving it around. Living it, giving it, having it, taking it, moving it, shaking it, creating it, loving it. Living it is loving it. Living it is sewing a coat, investing each stitch with magic, creating a unique design, putting it on and wearing it for the rest of your life. Living it is knowing that what you see, what you hear is tangible. It's being a rock in the river and being the river too. It's hearing, you'll never be able to do that. Living it is knowing you will do it. It's speaking the unspoken. It's thinking the unthinkable. It's doing the unexpected. It's quitting before you get fired.